Hey y'all, Katie here with Team Evoaz, and welcome to the Arizona Monthly Market Housing Update with Matt and Katie, where you learn all about the greater Phoenix area housing market, including information on interest rates, what's happening with housing prices, and tips and tricks for buyers and sellers. Please like, subscribe, and download our episode so that we can continue to get this real news out to the real people.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the monthly market update. It is Katie and
Matt and
Ryan.
What's up, team?
What's going on?
Oh, happy Halloween season, everybody.
Yes, happy Halloween. And thank you so much, Ryan. I got to give you a quick shout out. Thank you so much for being at our client appreciation party a couple of weeks ago. It was so fun.
It was a blast. We had such a great time, my wife and I. So thanks again for putting on such an amazing party.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then save the date,
dressed
guys.
up.
What's that?
Everyone dressed up, so that was great. You know, it was really good.
Yeah, most everyone did. So that was really cool. But for those of you out there, save the date. Our next client appreciation party is coming up next year on October 12th. So just wanted to throw that out there for those of you who really enjoyed yourself this year. Wait until next year. It's going to be even better. So let's get started with what we always get started with, and that is rates with Ryan. Take it away, Ryan.
Thanks, Katie. You've probably been reading in the news, September and October. It's been tough for mortgage rates. We've had about 60 days of steady increases. This is largely because, seemingly positive news. The economy has continued to be resilient, even in the face of high interest rates. Retail sales in September and even third quarter gross domestic product, which was just released this morning, it's a measure of, foods and services purchased, were higher than expected. This shows that consumers are still spending. And the jobs reports are showing twice as many jobs as being created than forecasted. And businesses, they're hanging on to their employees too. So, pay is either staying steady or even increasing. And on top of all this, reports are showing that energy and food prices have gone up month over month. So all of this shows that, more money is being spent and costs are going up, which, bottom line, it's increasing inflation, which does lead to higher mortgage rates. And, not helping this, Katie, I know you had this in a video on Monday. Fed Chair Jerome Powell commented that the Federal Reserve, they may hike rates again this year. It's not certain, but they may. But they did say for sure that they'll keep rates higher for longer, really. The Fed, they do want to see a little slowdown in the economy to really help lower inflation. They're just not getting it. Like I said, it's resilient right now. So we may not be seeing, the significant shift in rates lower until maybe early next year. But, it will happen. It just hasn't happened yet. It'll be basically later than the Federal Reserve and in general the housing market was hoping for. But that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
That is great.
And does it make a difference? I'm assuming, yes, that the season that we're coming into is going to be a big retail season and food purchases and things like that for holidays. Does that make a difference, guys?
It definitely does. Yeah, the holiday spending always, and they're kind of factoring that in.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I think, what they're seeing here is that a lot of credit is being maxed out right now. There has been, but a lot of it has been on credit cards, and they're hitting their high credit limit. So it might be a little bit of a slower, holiday season based off of where we're at. So that's still to be seen, but that's what the Fed thinks could happen.
Yeah, and I think, that's ultimately kind of what they're pushing for. We can see what the Fed is doing. They're actively trying to combat inflation. And like the necessary evil of combating inflation is stopping spending, slowing spending. So, it's kind of the double-edged sword there. As far as housing goes, what we're seeing, it's going to really depend on what portion of the country you're in. But I think we're seeing it definitely in all industries.
For sure. And inflation shot up quite a bit. We were just talking a little bit, a couple of years ago, we were just talking a little bit before the show, how incredible that gap is between like 2020 and 2021, where we went from, I think it was 1.4 up to 7 real quick. So that was, what a shock. Has that happened in history? I don't know. I guess I would need to look that up.
Yeah. Not that quickly, I don't think. But definitely in the 1980s, we saw it happen. This one was definitely more, I would say, not artificial, but more, stirred by our government because, we had $5 trillion of COVID relief money come into the global market. You know what I mean? I think what we were saying, it was like $817 billion that actual residents of America saw. That's what was paid out. So a little less than 20% of that $5 trillion, but that's a lot of money. I mean, that's almost double what the debt was, the national debt in 2019. So I think inflation is just a very, very expected byproduct.
Yeah. And with respect to households, this came out armless, ARMLS, that's our armless program here in Phoenix, Arizona area, came out with these statistics a couple of weeks ago, or this information, I should say. And I'll read it to you for those of you who are listening to the podcast, just the audio version. The drop in mortgage rates in 2020 and 2021 were accompanied by 3 rounds of COVID-19 stimulus checks. March 2020 gave you $1,200 per income tax filer, $500 per child if you had a kid. December 2020, $600 per income tax filer, $600 per kid. And then March 2021, $1,400 per income tax filer and $1,400 per kid. So to understand, they go on to say, to understand the sudden rise in interest rates, we need to look no further than the table of historical inflation rates. Just as the last round of stimulus checks were sent out in March 2021, which we just saw on the graph, right? Yeah. Inflation quickly accelerated, and it accelerated big.
Yeah. All to be expected, right?
Yeah, because on top of that, the Fed, they decreased the funds rate to 0%.
Yeah.
Right.
So what they wanted to see, obviously, they feared that, the pandemic and lockdown was going to just stop spending. No one wanted the economy, slowing to a stop because of it. And it worked, people started spending again. I remember 2020 actually got some shelving in my garage. And the gentleman who came in to install it said it's the busiest he's ever been in the middle of the pandemic. He's like, I got, 8 weeks of orders and I'm catching up on it. People were spending because borrowing was so cheap. And people, when they criticized, what the Fed did, they kept it at 0 for too long because it was really 2 years straight where people really had easy money. It was cheap. People were taking out lines of credit, refinancing, and the economy was flooded with money. So we're kind of seeing, what happens because of that for 2 years. That's the bad side. It's where the pendulum swings to the other direction where we have to tighten things up to kind of get back to an equilibrium, and the Fed, they increased it to over 5% now, and it has worked. Katie, I know you had that slide where it kind of did show that inflation did drop quite a bit this year. Yes. It's just not to their target range yet. They want to be at about 2%, and we're kind of in the mid 3s right now. Right. So we'll get there, and a lot of people are a little more hopeful for 2024 that we'll get there. The Fed will acknowledge that we're where they want to be. They'll pause rate hikes, maybe even lower rate hikes next year, which I do think will boost the economy and the housing market and everything. So we're all hopeful for a good 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the same. And when you even look at it, rates are how they combated this, and they came forward with 0% interest rates. That really hit the housing like perfectly. And at the same time, I'm wondering if they really thought of this in depth and how the psyche of what home represented to people during that time. And I know we talked about it before, but it fundamentally changed. It was no longer just a home. It was, it was literally everything in your life.
It was your school,
office,
your gym.
School. Yep. Yes. Everything where you do your birth, everything you did was at home. And it's now, it had a whole different meaning. So, when shelter in place is taking effect, your home has a whole different meaning and value. And that's exactly what we saw. I think it was ultimately good too, because, we were at a point where inventory was already low in the nation. If you remember in 2019, going into 2020, we were already starting to see it. Mm-hmm. Builders are starting to ramp back up. It was now a little bit over a decade from the collapse. And they were becoming a little bit more confident. So we were seeing that happen. So then all of a sudden you have COVID happen that didn't, redefining what home means and then dropping interest rates to historic lows, of course, everyone and their mom was like, we want this, whether we're living in it or we're renting it, or, it's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to speak to what you were saying about your guy with the shelves saying that he was, it's the busiest he's ever been. How many contractors were also the busiest they've ever been because people were remodeling their homes either to, enjoy them more during that time or to prepare them to sell. We saw a lot of that.
We did. But it also kind of like shines a light on America's fiscal responsibility. When you start to see things like automobiles,
right,
all of a sudden a known depreciating asset, it's one thing you learn, like a car is not an asset. It's something that you're going to lose your money on. Immediately start to appreciate. Some cars, you know what I mean, literally went up almost 100% in value, used cars, within a 2-month period, 3-month period, which is insane. We're seeing that come down drastically now. Repossession rates are starting to go up through the roof, especially with the high rates. So, that just said a lot where people were spending their money and were they doing it, the best way.
Yeah.
Well, and the Fed really wanting to slow things down. You might hear in the news what they're trying to say, what they're calling for is what's called a soft landing, where they want to lower inflation, but they don't want to kill the economy by doing that.
Yeah.
And it's almost, with what we're seeing with the resiliency of the economy right now, the gross domestic product going in higher, jobs, spending, they might actually be able to accomplish that where they slow it down just enough where it doesn't slow to a halt, but, it lowers inflation to where they want to go. And then we could get back to that equilibrium, next year. So that's what they're hoping for. And right now it could possibly happen.
100%. And I believe that, like, if you look at this and you correlate this to other times, especially in the 1980s, when we were dealing with a huge spike in inflation, the biggest difference, one of the biggest things we have now is our tech industry. We are just so much more technically, evolved as a species globally that, approaching these issues is a whole different monster. And I do think that's ultimately showing its resilience, not only just through our technological advancements, but I also think when it comes to housing and all these other things, we've been doing this dance now where we're more skilled, we're more prepared, we're more planned, to approach these things, like you said, in more of a soft landing, as I believe, the old approach with a scalpel and not a hatchet, so yeah.
It's funny you brought up the 80s because yes, the 80s, when I'm dealing with boomers who are buying right now and we quote them rates in the sevens or even eights in some cases, they're like, no big deal. In the 80s, it was 16%. So, it's still not bad. So it's all perspective,
It
because
is.
the 80s was when inflation was really high and that was probably the highest that we had to see rates go to tame it. So we're not going that crazy to get things back to normal. But it's kind of funny how the boomers are like, hey, it's not as bad as it was in the 80s.
Right.
100.
They have the perspective. They're dealing with a little bit of different price points, I'm sure,
yes,
at this point.
But yeah, and it's funny, but if you think of like exactly what you're saying, it's all relative.
Yeah.
So if you go back into the 1960s when, the mortgages started, before that, you had to pay cash for a home.
Yeah.
Just imagine that if you were entering the housing industry and you wanted to be a homeowner, there was not even a mortgage. There was some very, very risky loans and stuff that you could take, but you're talking about major risk, really putting yourself out there and only catering to a small percentage of the public that could actually afford to purchase a home. Then you come into the, the introduction of the mortgage and the 30-year mortgage, and it rolled nicely. And then here comes the 80s inflation. We go up, once again, 19%. People were probably shaking their head saying, oh my God, I can't believe how much it is to buy a home. But you blink your eye and sure enough, now people are now ready for that. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to think that, once again, if you're going to buy a $550,000 house and you're putting the minimal amount down, you are looking at a $4,000 a month payment. If you were to say that to someone, 5 years ago, they would be shocked. And not only the fact that it's representative of $550,000, 5 years ago, the average home was $250,000.
Right.
550 is now a starter home. What I mean? That's what the average people are purchasing. But then you quickly look and you say, hey, what does it cost to rent that same home right now, that 2,500 square foot home that we'd be looking to spend on this, or, it's really close.
Yeah.
It's not, you're still going to be in the 3,000s. So, and I think that's pointing to people are now just getting used to these new costs. It's going to take a little bit, but this is the new norm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think renters need to consider, and some of them haven't been homeowners, so it's probably tough for them to consider this, but they need to consider that it's more stable for them. So they're, more than likely going to be in a fixed rate. They have the ability to refinance when rates come down so that they can lower those costs. They're not going to get booted by their landlord because their landlord wants to sell, or their landlord wants to constantly increase the rental amount. They're going to gain equity. Like, there's just so much stability in it that I feel like renters really need to strongly consider versus just looking at that sticker shock.
Yeah. No, 100%. I fully agree with that.
And sticker shock's not going to get better. I mean, in the foreseeable future, unless, of course, rates come down, that's going to change their payment. But as far as housing prices, we're still seeing increases, very modest year over year at this point. Obviously, with the rates and everything, sales are down. I think we saw our high watermark for prices probably already in June. But we're still seeing increases. And Ryan, you had mentioned it on a video, that Tip Tuesday video recently, that it's across the country. So this is national.
It is, yeah. And what's interesting is we are seeing kind of an uptick in inventory, which we're very happy to see. We have a lot of buyers who've been on the fence because they just were not seeing the homes they want out there. And then all of a sudden, over the past month, they're starting to kind of pull them up on the MLS. Like, oh, I'm seeing houses in the range and where I want them to be. And a lot of that has to do with the seasonality of inventory. It goes up during the holidays. Houses sit a little bit longer. Not everybody wants to buy during the holidays, and we're anticipating rates obviously dropping next year. So it could be a really good time to get in where there might not be as much competition. There's going to be more inventory. Yep. Maybe, you could get a better deal on the house, get some seller paid closing costs. So next couple of months could be a really good opportunity.
I totally agree because, like Matt always says, a lot of the sellers that we have on the market right now are motivated to sell for whatever reason. So, a job change or whatever it is that has happened in their lives. And so with that motivation, the buyers then have more of an opportunity to negotiate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I think that's, good. And once again, I think it's healthy because like you say, you have sticker shock initially, but look at most of our products, even in our lifetime, guys. When we were growing up, it was less than $1 a gallon. Look at where it is now. It's never been back to $1. It's just slowly trickled up. Same with candy bars, same with everything that you can remember. It does that. We're going to see the same thing with housing, which is almost like it's conditioning us to the point, especially now, which is like a balance to what you're saying for people that are going to buy, to think about this, because right now we are being conditioned at this price to say, okay, well, 6 months ago to digest a $4,000 a month mortgage is going to be a lot different than 6 months from now if we're still remaining, at a higher rate. People are going to start saying, okay, this is the norm. So the second we even see a little bit of a drop, they're now conditioned by the new price and then motivated by the little drop. And that's where we're going to see it. The balance is inventory. Now you look at it, historically, especially in housing, we've only seen like a slew of inventory added, and we all remember that. And that was a whole different monster. That was a totally different game. That was nothing of the same. Where we're at now is inventory is ultimately going to be controlled by new builds, right? Unless something catastrophic happens that's going to motivate people to walk away from historically locked 30-year rates, low, and that's going to take a really big event for people to walk away from their 3% interest rates with their 200,000 plus equity in their home. And that's where I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
The other side is new builds. And what we're seeing here is actually amazing. And Arizona, and I think they've been conditioned because of what they experienced in 2006 through 2010, they got decimated. And they really didn't have a blueprint. They really didn't have a plan. They were kind of pioneers, just, fueled by capitalism and how can we move as much as we can. And then they got caught. Oh my gosh, now we got to get rid of it. What they did then was just price drops. And they knew it. They're like, all right, we're building a house at 100,000 and we were selling it for 300. We have huge margins. We can just dump them. But what they realized is that shot themselves in the foot huge. It was a domino effect. Builders now, they learned and they were like, we are not doing that again. And they saw this coming. They started pumping the brakes over a year ago, as far as land acquisition, which is going to be the first stage of a new build, and not to mention even breaking ground and pushing stuff. Now, fast forward, through this whole to now, they didn't price drop. They have not price dropped. They've actually just increased incentives. They've held tight, which is great. It's good for all of our resale. And that's what really makes me feel like we are not going to see a slew of new homes being added and price drops. So the second we see this little rate drop and everyone kind of conditioned to the new norm, boom, I think we are going to see a quick rush.
They're going to chow up the inventory that we do have
in Phoenix. Absolutely. And it's not a lot. Look how fast you can see 4,000 homes on the market disappear. We saw that multiple times here in the last few years. It goes like that. So, and then the big question is that our new baseline. Have we seen our new baseline? And now we are just now in a correction period that now we're just going to be in this trajectory that's just going to be slightly raising back up. And I think that's going to be the case. Nationally, here we might see it accelerate a little bit faster, especially if the Diamondbacks win the World Series. All right.
we had a shout out the Diamondbacks, actually.
Yeah, shout out to the Diamondbacks. Woo! So it's just these. I think there's a lot of really good things that are happening.
Totally agree. Last topic, unless you guys have anything else to add, foreclosures. So Ryan, you had said you're getting questions about foreclosures. What have been common questions?
The media kind of takes the numbers and they can kind of spin it a little bit. There's this clickbait articles. I see them too. But when you kind of really, trickle down into the numbers, it's like your graph will show. Sure, it's an increase, but it's so small and so much lower than it was historically, especially during the peak that we saw in 2008 through 2010. So, it's still such a significantly low amount of foreclosures going on right now. It's not going to make any kind of a difference right now in the market.
No.
Totally agree with you. I have, I do want to show that slide here. There it is. I have one or two buyers that's like, oh no, we're waiting for the huge tsunami of foreclosures to come that we think are coming, and all we want to buy is a foreclosure and blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling them, I'm like, well, you got 31 to choose from here in the Phoenix area. Like that's it. But this graph, again, taken from Armless. I just love Armless. They put out what's called the stat report once a month, and it just has a lot of great juicy info. And this is active residential notices of trustee sale in Maricopa County from July 2009 through September 2023. So where we're at is all the way to the right-hand side of the graph here. So we're well below the worry line, that yellow worry line. And you can see, if you go to the left-hand side of the graph, what an actual tsunami and foreclosures looks like, which is what we saw in 2009 and 10 when Matt was really busy.
Oh, the days.
Those were the days, weren't they?
Oh gosh, it was crazy. To go back in time, right? Hindsight's 2020. And I it's funny. People kind of root for this. They want it because it's easy, to think of it. But the big thing that people are not considering, even with when they say foreclosures, they think, oh, foreclosures, this convenient process that the bank forecloses and it goes to the court steps and then it gets released to the public on a discounted price. No, that discounted price was only there because of inventory levels. Correct. The bank didn't want to hold anything. They were dealing with TARP. There was all these things. Right now, the banks, if they foreclose anything, they are going to instantly foreclose. They are going to set the bid at or above market price to deter anyone, any investor, anyone trying to buy it at the foreclosure happening. For it to then, no one buys, then it reverts back to the beneficiary. The bank knows it. If anything, they're excited. They just cleared a 3% interest rate, possibly, that they were having to honor. They're now holding a property that they know is worth it. They'll probably
has equity.
sit on it, correct, and wait for it to go up. or package it, in which they're doing now. And then the BlackRocks will come in and they buy these tapes of, 150 plus properties, and the consumer will never see it. So I just think that that's where people really need to think about this, that the foreclosure process and what we remember in the 2006 to 2010s is not the foreclosure process that we will see anywhere in the future. It will not benefit the people, the little people. It's only going to benefit the big giant corporations and upper ends of things.
I 100% agree. And for those of you who cannot see the chart because you're listening to the podcast version, just want to read just this little paragraph here that Armless put out with the chart. And it says, the chart below, created by Sarah Perkins, a local market expert, paints a different picture of our current foreclosure activity in Maricopa County. As you can see, active notices are at historical lows. You can also see what a foreclosure tsunami looks like in 2009 and 2010. So it's just, I mean, it's significant. What is it? 50, looks like goes up to almost 50,000 right there on the left-hand side. Just for those of you who are listening, can't see the graph. In Maricopa County in September of this year, there were a total of 30 residential foreclosures, 31 last month, and only 24 last September. There were 6 more foreclosures this September compared to last September. But I have to admit, it's much more dramatic to say residential foreclosures shot up 24% year over year than to say it was only 6 more. So
it's funny numbers.
Like remember, if you go from 1 foreclosure to 2, that's a 100% increase.
Right.
But you're like, that's only 2 foreclosures. That's just kind of
hell yeah. And then go ahead.
Oh, sorry, man.
No, go ahead.
Now, but what's interesting is, we've had some clients who have purchased homes, and on that chart that you just put up there, Katie, it was interesting because it talks about the amount of equity that people have in their homes. That's a big reason we're not seeing foreclosures. And we've had clients who've called us that have had life events that maybe in the past, in 2008, if your home was upside down, they would have just walked away or done a short sale. But now they say, hey, we do have to sell. We're having a life event. We got to get rid of the house. But we have $200,000 in equity. We're going to sell the house. That's what's happening. They're not walking away. They're selling it to tap into that equity and move on to the next, part of their lives, and they're maybe purchasing again. So, but that's one of the big difference there is how much equity that is available right now.
Exactly.
Tons. And I was going to say like that the 24% is like the exact how you see mainstream media and news just manipulate clickbait. Because it's a truthful stat,
the math is mathing.
Increase in foreclosures. Everyone's flocking to it, and they realize it's 6 more. We had 50,000 in
the heyday.
6 more. Oh God, that's hilarious. They weren't. It was like 6 an hour or 6 a minute we were having during that time. Like it was stupid. So yeah, it's so funny. Good stuff.
Yeah, it was unbelievable and unbelievably different than what we're dealing with now. So for those of you out there that you see the headlines and you're thinking that there's this big wave coming, no big wave. All right, guys, anything else you want to add?
Go D-backs, I guess, right, man?
Yeah, definitely go D-backs. Like this is huge.
So huge for Phoenix. Thank you guys so much for being here yet again. Another month under our belts with lots of juicy information for our clients and followers out there. If you guys want to check out any previous months, you want to hear what we said back in June, then check out our YouTube channel. We are at Team EvoAZ. That is our handle. If you are more of the podcast type, you prefer to listen rather than watch, then you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. Just do a quick search for Arizona Real Estate Radio. We will be back next month. Thank you guys so much.
Bye, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Bye, everyone. Happy Halloween. Be safe.